Come on, Livingston. We gotta go on and on and on. Together we can make it. We gotta go on and on and on. Come on, Livingston.
Knocks it through. Mullen bursting into the box. Josh Mullen.
Together we can make it.
Mullen's ball across, it's turned in! It's Pittman who's got it! Livingston leads!
Road is long.
Can they get the ball back in? O'Brien.
Lead! And Livingston have the lead!
Man, can score.
If we march together.
The full-time whistle blows and David Hayes celebrates! And the Livingston fans join in exultation.
Come on, Livingston.
Livingston have the lead against Rangers, and they are certainly rising to a few occasions on their return to the top flight in Scotland.
Come on, Livingston. We gotta go.
Hello, you're listening to Talk Livi, the podcast dedicated to West Lothian's finest football team, Livingston Football Club, and proudly sponsored by Strana Apparel. My name's Euan, and Angus is away gallivanting off in Prague, so we've invited every Livy fan's favourite Airdrie fan onto the podcast, Callum Carson. First of all, get it right round you, Callum. Your reserves are pish. 7-0, that's embarrassing. But how you doing apart from that?
That's just a reserves game, 7 down.
I can't believe all 7 goals were offside as well, including the penalty.
Even the penalty.
How you doing, mate?
Aye, all good, all good. Funnily enough, I took in the first half of the reserves game, but I was pretty much working, so I wasn't actually paying attention. I didn't even know what the score was at half time when I left.
Or is that just because you lost count?
Possibly. Every time I looked up, I was off. Another goal.
But as always, just search for Talk Livi on your preferred podcast streaming site, where you can follow or subscribe so you don't miss an episode. And you can also catch all our episodes that we've done today as well. We'll get the ball rolling by looking back at our trip to the capital as the Lions chased Lee Johnson out of Easter Road and recorded their first Premiership win of the campaign. Our women's side were also back on home plastic and came up against Boroughmuir Thistle at the weekend, but it would be a share of the spoils. Callum will obviously touch on what the gaffer's thoughts were on the game as well. And finally, we look ahead to our next Premiership fixture as St Mirren make the trip to West Lothian. The Lions made the trip to Easter Road this weekend, and a superb and clinical display would see Livy record a 3-2 victory and their first Premiership win of the campaign as well. First of all, just before we get into the actual game and the content of the game itself, Callum, what was your first initial thoughts on the starting 11? Curtis Guthrie starting once again. Jamie Brandon came back into the side. I believe Christian Montano is going to be out for a few weeks, and we'll touch on the signing that was made yesterday as well. But what was your kind of initial take on the starting 11?
No real arguments. I thought Davey did kind of touch on Anderson maybe not quite being ready before the game, and you kind of thought Guthrie had deserved to keep his place, really. He played well, and Brucey came on and scored within 2 minutes, which is a nice headache to have going forwards for selection when you've got so many players kind of playing so well.
Yeah, but Curtis Guthrie obviously started that opening game of the league campaign against Aberdeen, and I think the tactic was to have a bit more physicality in the side up against Aberdeen, who are a fairly physical side themselves. But Hibs have got that sort of soft centre just now. They're leaking a lot of goals. Do you reckon that was maybe in the thinking to almost rough them up at the back a little bit with Curtis being in the starting 11 as well?
I think that's exactly what it was. Kind of get the physical stuff out of the way for 60 minutes and then kind of try and pick them apart with the pace and kind of precision and intelligence, shall we say, of Bruce, kind of the natural goal-scoring instinct that he has.
And going into the game itself, we opened the scoring early doors. I believe it was an own goal. It's quite difficult and inconclusive from the footage. Scott Pittman obviously tried to claim it, but it was a great bit of football, starting with Obelai, in my opinion, kind of opens the opportunity up by splitting the lines with the pass initially into Newbley, and that relationship between Newbley and Penrice on that left-hand side was just a constant threat for Hibs all afternoon. But it's a superb delivery by Penners, and Pittman's put, as Davey kind of touched on, Pittman's put the pressure on Abita and forced him into the OG almost.
Aye, totally. Whether it's Obita's or Pittman's doesn't really matter. It's not a goal if Pittman doesn't make the run. But aye, they had joy pretty much for the entire 90 minutes down that flank.
And it was almost a carbon copy of the goal later on in the half when Pittman slid into David Marshall as well. But as I say, we'll come on to touch on Penrice's display later on. But in the first half, Hibs dominated the ball quite a lot, but other than a Doidge header, I can't really think of anything of real note that Shamal George had to do, and actually for quite large spells of the game, to be honest.
Aye, well, I looked at I had a wee check at the stats at half time, and Hibs hadn't actually had a shot on target. When you add in the fact that Aberdeen didn't have a single shot on target for the 90 minutes and the nothing each draw, that was two kind of European qualifiers, and for 135 minutes, a game and a half, not even allowing them a shot on target, shows you how kind of well structured the defence was.
Yeah, it's been a big theme so far this season, is the defence has seemed to have been a lot more solid kind of feel to the team this campaign, albeit we've conceded a few goals in the Premiership fixtures so far. But what have you kind of made overall of the defensive displays of the team this season?
Just feels so much better, doesn't it? It just looks better. You feel more comfortable. Mick Devlin
he's immense, isn't he?
He's only at Livingston because of his injury history. If he stays fit, he will walk away with a Player of the Year by a wide margin. I would think he is so good.
I've said this on other podcasts that I've done. I think he has the potential to be, if we can get him on the park, say for 25 to 30 games this season, I reckon he has the potential to be one of the signings of the season in the league.
Absolutely.
I think he's, and as you say, he's probably not at Livingston if it wasn't for his kind of checkered injury record over the last kind of 3 to 4 years. But moving on into the second half of the game, we could have stretched our lead early doors. Again, talking on that physical side from Curtis Guthrie, brilliant little flick on for Newbley. He's 1v1, he's hit straight at Boric. There was also a shout for a penalty on Ayo Obelai on the edge of the box for handball from Hibs, albeit I think they screamed for just about any time Martin Boyle hit the deck anywhere around the 18-yard box anyway. But kind of looking at it again, it would have been a really harsh penalty award with Ayo's hands being pretty tucked in.
No, absolutely. My first instinct was that, kind of watching it live, was that it would have been a harsh one, and I think VAR got that one right.
Makes a change, doesn't it?
It's definitely a bonus when that happens.
Seem to have spoke about VAR a lot less this season, which has just given me the fear for later in the campaign. It's almost like they're saving it up, just easing us in to what will be the drama of VAR in the Scottish Premiership. But we would be pegged back eventually, and it was probably as I say, first kind of clear sight of goal that Hibs had, and it was probably the first header that Devlin lost all afternoon, the initial flick on from Doidge. And we kind of touched on it where I thought Hibs might cause us some problems when I was chatting to Matty from Long Bangers, but in terms of pace, and the one time Boyle's got ahead of steam and being able to drive direct at us, and it's created a goal, and it's a tidy finish in the end from him.
I mean, he's such a good player. As soon as he got past his marker, you kind of thought, and then cut inside. As soon as he cut inside, you're like, that's going top corner. That's definitely, I would say, with the defence as kind of solid and as improved as it has been, it definitely kind of seems to lack someone with blistering pace, shall we say, someone who can match the likes of Boyle, etc. when they're getting run at.
Obviously losing guys like the likes of Nicky Devlin, for example, who was naturally very, very quick and had that ton of pace, but it would be a instant response, and it would be that combination again between Penrice and Newbley down the left-hand side. And Anderson, as you mentioned, just that natural goal-scoring instinct, finds himself in the 6-yard box. But it's a brilliant hang-up by Penrice in the first place, and nicely tucked away by Bruce Anderson, who's certainly hit the goal trail so far this season.
Aye, absolutely. That's kind of... You never really get a kind of consistent run of goals last year. And, I mean, he's already, including the League Cup, he's already had a cracking start this year. I think that was really just instinct. That was kind of knowing where to be, where Penrice was going to put the ball. And I think we've seen many goals already from Hibs this year kind of being conceded in that kind of manner, just getting beat in the air, basically.
Yeah, I hadn't actually seen the Aston Villa game, but I saw kind of brief highlights before Sports Scene, and it's all cross balls. Other than the penalty, it's all coming from cross balls. And the opening day of the season against St Mirren, the winner from St Mirren, it's a cross ball again. So it's clearly something Davies looked at and tried to exploit, and we've done it to some effect at the weekend.
Oh, absolutely. So you have to kind of pick on your opponent's weakness, really, don't you? And fortunately, kind of deservedly, it worked, because Penrice, Newblay, even Brandon as well. Brandon and DeLucas had a wee spell at kind of right wing back as well, and they were all impressive.
And to kind of touch on what would prove to be the winning goal from Mo Sangari, obviously some entertaining comments from the gaffer and Mo regarding the winner, but it's a initially brilliant play by Jason Holt to win the ball on the edge of the box. He sends Newblay on his way, and I have to say, from a defensive point of view from Hibs, Neil stood off Newblay and basically allowed him to pick the ball over the top. Yeah. But it's a fantastic ball over the top, and Sangari's had to adjust himself a little bit and I think he's almost caught the keeper off guard, the fact that he's taken the shot on. But he's absolutely hammered it. We were right behind it in the away end, and as soon as he hit the ball, you just knew it was in the back of the net, and what a way to win the game.
Oh, it's been, to be fair, Davey kind of alluded to it after the game as well. It's been quite a while since Livi have had a guy who's 25, 30 yards out, you can say, right, let's have a pop and feel fairly confident that it will at least be on target. Aye, and Mo, that was some way to score your first goal for the club, an absolute... I'd like to know the mileage on that ball, put it that way, because it was...
Well, the Sports Scene camera couldn't keep up with it.
It was some hit.
Superb hit, but Davies, when speaking to Davey, touched on Sangari being almost a direct replacement for the likes of Omionga. But certainly from the snippets I've seen of Mo playing, I'll use kind of the game up at Cove as an example, when he came off the bench and he had an effort that kind of fizzed just over the bar. It's something that I've obviously scored at the weekend as well with fantastic effort, but he seems to have a bit more of a goal threat from the middle of the park than the likes of an Omionga, because when Stefan, no disrespect to him, got into those kind of areas in the final third, you weren't expecting much to come of it, whilst Mo, you think, potential to threaten goal.
Aye, absolutely. And I'd say you need that. Obviously, Stephen Kelly's kind of more a number 10. I know he can kind of play a wee bit further back, but having someone in the centre of midfield who has that threat, I mean, it can change games, and it did change the game on Saturday. That's 3 points won, essentially, because of the goal. You know, someone having even just the courage. How many times have we seen over the last couple of years has been tippy-tappy stuff, 25, 30 yards from goal, and just saying, shoot, someone shoot. I think Mo's someone who won't hesitate to shoot when the opportunity's there.
He certainly licked the ball very well there, didn't he? And I saw there was a few pictures getting done of him licking a football on Twitter earlier on. So folk have obviously picked up on that.
I never thought I'd turn up to Easter Road and hear Davy Martindale talking about licking balls.
But it was another kind of funny anecdote from that goal is clearly Will Fish wasn't running at his maximum either. He clearly wasn't being chased down by a lion. He was having to chase the lion, wasn't he, for that goal?
But I could see like where we are in the press box. You could kind of see it perfectly. You thought there was 2 or 3 seconds before the ball actually landed at Sangari. You were like, this guy knows he's not getting that. It was that kind of slow motion run backwards. Oh, bugger, it's gone over my head. You just knew he wasn't getting it, and Sangare made him pay.
Exactly, but it would be maybe a slightly nervier finish with Hibs pulling a goal back. Error from Shamal George, wee bit unfortunate. The ball seems to have taken a bit of a bounce in front of him, and he's not been able to gather it. And Josh Campbell's managed to knock in the rebound. But again, to kind of touch on, albeit we've conceded 2 goals in the game, but I thought some of the defensive displays from the entire back three were pretty exceptional over the course of the afternoon, given, the likes of Euan. I thought DeLucas done a fantastic job on Euan, teamed up with Jamie Brandon very well, albeit Jamie picked up a yellow card, so probably had to come off, and Scott Pittman filled in the right wing back slot for a spell. And then Devlin just looked like a Rolls Royce and strolled through the game. But I think somebody who's not received a lot of plaudits is probably Ayo Obileye. And I think the fact that you're not needing to talk about Ayo is actually a very good thing.
Yeah, totally. I think, and again, it's another one kind of Davey touched on last year. I think even Davey was surprised at how worse the defence looked when Ayo got injured. I don't think it's a coincidence that Ayo gets injured, the team looks defensively worse. Granted, there's a change of system and Mick's been signed as well, but Ayo's come back into the team and the defence looks a lot better.
Yeah, I don't think it's probably the physical aspect of it, because no disrespect to maybe the likes of Morgan Boys, he's still kind of new to first team football.
Almost,
And he was kind of behind as well when he came into the side last season, probably turn of the year. He came back from his injury. So, yeah, I think it is quite startling to see how big an impact Ayo seems to have made on the defence this season, and long may it continue. But after that second Hibs goal, Livi could have probably actually made the game a bit more comfortable, had a couple of opportunities. Newbley got in behind and it's been blocked. And then Bruce Anderson's also blazed one into the stand just at the tail end of the game. So, kind of looking at the game as a whole, it was a pretty deserved 3 points, wasn't it?
No, totally. 3-2 actually massively flattered Hibs, to be fair. See, if it's kind of alluded to there, the Shamal George kind of fumble. Newbley could have scored when he should have dinked it over Boric at the start of the second half. Anderson had a chance at the end. It could quite easily have been 4-1 rather than 3-2,
It was certainly a very good performance, but to kind of touch on the Hibs aspect of it, it would see Lee Johnson lose his job. Is Davy Martindale officially the Grim Reaper of Hibs managers?
It's incredible, eh? It wasn't quite as vitriolic as the Jack Ross game where Hibs went down to 9
the complete implosion of Hibs was.
They just chucked it that day, but you could tell. Like, I went into the press room afterwards, and usually managers are in after 20, 25 minutes, and I think it was 45 minutes before Lee Johnson came in, and you're like, that's either he's already been spoken to or there is a meeting being had. It felt like the end. It felt like the end from a Hibs point of view. I don't know that you could continue after that.
I don't know what it is about Lee Johnson, but I don't think a lot of Hibs fans have ever really taken to him at all since he came in the door. Just, I think some of the comments he comes out with after games, contradiction, using words I don't think he even knows the meaning of, like gravitas. He didn't. I was listening to a couple of Hibs podcasts kind of talking about it, and they mentioned how Hibs fans really took to the likes of Neil Lennon and Alan Stubbs and things like that because of their personalities, whilst Johnson just seemed such a Marmite character, and it seems like he's almost been walking on eggshells ever since he took the job. So I don't think it was any surprise that it's actually a surprise he's lasted a year, to be honest.
I mean, they're just so inconsistent. A team like Hibs, and granted they did qualify for Europe, but you need to be doing it a wee bit more impressively than he's done. And then to start this season, albeit Aston Villa aside, obviously I know they got beaten the first leg in Andorra, but the second leg was fairly comfortable. Yeah, you can't start the season off with 3 defeats. in games you'd actually be looking to win. It's not like Livi's schedule where they've played 3 of the top 5.
We're going to make that 4 at the weekend. 4 of the top 6. So
Hibs would have been. I think Hibs would have been looking at that, saying, if we can get 7 points, I think that's fair. So to be on 0 is quite something.
But to get back onto ourselves, kind of polar opposite, you look at our start to the season in terms of the fixtures we had, Aberdeen, Rangers, Hibs, 2 of the games being away from home as well.
Yeah.
What have you kind of made of the start to the season from Livy?
A hell of a lot better than I thought it would be, to be honest. I thought they'd be Hibs just now, I thought they'd be on 0 points from those first 3 games. It's just, some of the football played in the last couple of years has been tremendous. But just to see them getting back to the Brexit ball stuff, so to speak, just the 100% energy, 100% effort. It's other fans of other teams might hate it, but I bloody love watching it. Honestly, I really do. It is so good to watch.
It is. We've talked about it. We've become the bastards of the league a little bit. I feel again that nobody wants to come and play against, and I feel the last couple of years we've moved away from that, almost trying to transition into playing a different way. But I feel we've lost, and I think Davey touched on that when I spoke to him at the start of the season, that we'd almost moved away from where we got our success in terms of coming up the leagues and into the top flight. So I think it was much needed to have to go back to that a little bit, especially a season where I think it will be more of a fight for us in terms of looking over our shoulder maybe. But going on to the actual game itself again, was there any particular performances that really stood out for you? I know we've touched on the performances of the back 3 in particular, but certainly further up the park, was there any performances that really impressed?
Penrice and Newbley are the 2 obvious ones. I think that was Newbley's best game since probably about February.
Yeah, I'd agree. Absolutely.
And in terms of Penrice, it was a great game. You know what he can do. Like, I don't think there's a wrong answer in terms of that kind of left wing back position. Either Montano or Penrice are both very, very good players. But with Chris being injured, it was kind of good and important to see Penrice just coming straight in and having such a good game kind of first up.
Yeah, you mentioned that. I don't think you weaken the side, albeit I think each of the wing backs gives you something slightly different.
Yeah.
Montano, when he's driving with the ball, probably from deep, is, I would say, more effective than Penners in that department. But I feel Penners is a kind of overlapping, bombing up and down fullback. I feel he's probably slightly better in that regard, and maybe even the kind of that final ball is maybe slightly better than Montano. So you get different qualities from each of them. But as you say, with Montano being out, it was fantastic for Penners to come in and make such an impact in the game with a couple of assists, and probably could have had another 2 or 3 assists on top of that with some of the deliveries he put across the 6-yard box. But fantastic way to go and get our first 3 points of the season, and hopefully we can carry that on into the St Mirren game.
Aye, absolutely. It'll be a tough challenge. I mean, St Mirren are essentially an injury time penalty away from being top of the league after 3 games, which tells you everything about the start they've had, despite, not unlike Livy, actually losing some key players.
We're delighted to have Strana Apparel as sponsors of Talk Livi. UK based with a Swedish soul, we are Strana. Strana is an independent fashion brand from Scotland who create high quality and stylish attire for on and off the terraces. Inspired by terrace culture, lifestyle and music, all their clothing is designed using quality materials and workmanship to combine the very best style and fit. All of this means you get a premium quality fashion at affordable prices while enjoying a simple and secure service.
As a bonus for Talk Livi listeners, you can get 10% off your order using the code TalkLivi at the checkout. We'll also have some exclusive giveaways during the season, so keep your eyes peeled on our socials for those too. And thanks to Strana for sponsoring Talk Livi.
Lionesses were in action as a number of players and manager Mike Ross came up against former side Boroughmuir Thistle. It would end honours even as the game finished 0-0. Unfortunately, neither of us were able to make the game due to other commitments over recent days. But Callum, you spoke with the gaffer earlier in the week. What was his take on the game?
Overall, fairly positive. I think it was one of those where the performance wasn't quite what you would hope for, but it's also kind of a sign of a good team when you're maybe not 100% and grinding out, still able to grind out results, especially in this league. Granted, a fair whack of the players will have played at this level already, but as a team and as a management and a coaching staff, it's still 3 games into a new higher division. So to be kind of show that kind of fighting quality to get draws when you're not maybe at your best isn't anything to be sniffed at, I don't think.
It's certainly a quality that the girls had last year, was maybe not playing to their full potential in games last year, but managing to grind out results. Do you reckon that's a quality that's almost carried on from last year?
Aye, definitely. It definitely seems that way. And when I spoke to Mike on Monday, he kind of said, I've got a squad full of people who give absolutely everything. And again, that's kind of all you can ask for. Not unlike the men's team, that's really all you can ask for. And with a bit more time to gel, maybe these draws do turn into wins 4, 6, 8 weeks down the line.
And obviously, Mike, having been at Boroughmuir Thistle before, a number of the girls that came in the summer had been at Boroughmuir Thistle. Do you reckon that maybe played a part in it being such a kind of close affair and almost cancelling each other out a little bit?
That's actually the exact kind of phrase I used to Mike. Was it kind of a case of almost knowing each other too well and it kind of cancelling each other out? And I think there was definitely an element of that. It did kind of seem like, for large parts, kind of a midfield battle where nobody really kind of had sustained the upper hand for kind of a sustained period of time. But I mean, that happens. It's also an 8-team league. You know, you're going to know every team quite well.
Yeah, because I think they play each other 3 times over the season, and then it splits like it did with the Championship last year. Obviously, you've been able to make a few of the games since Mike's taken over. Have you noticed anything particularly different from the team that won the Championship last year? There's obviously been a number of new arrivals as well who he's trying to integrate into the side. Is there anything you've kind of noticed a drastic change in?
Not massively, to be honest. A lot of the same kind of elements and kind of positive aspects still seem to be there. I think for me the major thing is it just feels like a much deeper squad. There are, it was a decent squad obviously last year. You don't win the league by accident, but it just seems like there's 2, maybe even 3 options in pretty much every position. And for a manager to have the ability to look at his bench and know that there's an option 1, 2, and 3 there for whatever situation the game dictates is definitely a positive.
And it's speaking to Angus, he's kind of pinpointed maybe a slight emphasis on showing a bit more patience with the ball at times and try to play through the thirds. He talked about the game against Glasgow the other week where they'd go a goal down, but there was a patience in the way that the girls played and they kept trying to stick to the task. Is that something you've maybe noticed from when you've seen them as well?
Aye, absolutely. Again, that was kind of exactly something Mike touched on when I spoke to him after the Glasgow game, just that patience that, granted we're 1-0 down, but I mean, we needed a goal when it was nothing each, so we need a goal when we're 1-0 down. Nothing changes in that aspect. Kind of trust the process, trust the game plan, trust each other. And when you've got Beth Mackay able to score from 30 yards, that's no bad thing.
By the way, when Angus was telling me about the goal, Angus being Angus probably undersold it, if I'm totally honest. I've seen it, I've obviously seen it since, and it is an outrageous effort from Beth.
It's the first touch as well. The first touch could not have been better because it sets her up absolutely perfectly.
But kind of talking about their start to the league campaign, it's kind of probably a bit similar. There's echoes the men's side as well. Stepping up a league in this regard for the women's side, 4 points on the board, albeit very competitive in the game they lost to Kilmarnock for large spells of it as well. What have you kind of made to the start of the season stepping up into SWPL2?
I think it's been very good, to be honest. I think Kilmarnock and Queen's Park, from kind of what I've seen so far, look like they might be the two strongest sides, certainly in the early showings, but it's still only 3 games in. Kilmarnock, there was 2-1 after, with 80 minutes, 75, 80 minutes, well in the game. Glasgow women were SPL 1 last season. You go away from home and get a win, which is a huge thing. And Boroughmuir were right up at the kind of top end last year as well. So to be able to get points in these games, it just eases the pressure a wee bit. You don't want to come into a new league and show you can be confident and kind of trust the players that are there and kind of have that belief. But if you're three games in with, say, 1 point or no points, then maybe you start going, oh, this is maybe a bit of a bigger step than we'd envisioned. All moving in the right direction, I think, is probably the best way to sum it up.
Now they've got the potential for a very tasty Scottish Cup tie.
Yeah.
They obviously move away from league duties. They make the trip to Perth to play St Johnstone at the weekend, but it's probably got eyes on potentially having Glasgow City at home in the next round, which would be the biggest test that they could face, the champions of Scotland. So how intriguing a tie is that for both Livy and St Johnstone?
As a cracker, and I think it actually shows you the importance of getting promoted as well, that you go into a cup and you're 1 game away from playing Glasgow City. I mean, they've won the league, 16 out of 17 years, 15 out of 16?
Yeah.
It's as glamorous a tie as you can get, especially with it being at home.
Well, hopefully the girls can move past St Johnstone, and then it'll be a really interesting tie to see some of the top players in the country coming to play at Livingston. So I would encourage anyone to try and get along to Perth to cheer the girls on for a very important cup tie. Finally, we look ahead to our next Premiership encounter as the Lions welcome St Mirren to West Lothian, the last game before the international break. Callum, how tough a game is this going to prove to be? And looking at the month of September, it seems to be, on paper, where Livy should be looking to try and target some more points.
Aye, absolutely. It's St Mirren, though, they always seem to, St Mirren and Motherwell, they just kind of seem to beat. St Mirren have been flying to start this season. It's obviously going to be a tough game, but see if you can win this game, you go into a run of fixtures that feel significantly more winnable, shall we say, and you go in with real confidence as well. So if you can get a result here, that might actually set you up pretty nicely for the next kind of 3 or 4 games after that as well.
Yeah, to kind of touch on St Mirren, you mentioned they've had a flying start to the season. I think before the weekend it was 7 wins on the bounce between the League Cup and the league ties that they've had so far, and it wasn't for a controversial penalty, as in I think it looked like a double hit from Miovski, so I can't believe that wasn't spotted by the VAR. Because I think it's pretty obvious. I think everyone knows when you've double hit the ball, when you're a left footer and the ball has that spin on it, it's near on impossible to generate that. So they can feel a bit hard done by that they're not sitting top of the league at the moment.
Aye, absolutely. It was funny, like when I first watched the penalty and heard folk moaning, I was like, what are you actually moaning about? And then I saw it again, I was like, all right, okay, that's fairly obvious actually. How has that one been missed? But I mean, Stephen Robinson's got a proven track record of being a very good manager in this league. He did it with Motherwell. He had a great season last year with St Mirren, and by all accounts, he's certainly on course to have another good season there as well. St Mirren just seem to be a bogey team. It doesn't matter who the manager is. It doesn't matter who's playing for them. They're just kind of two very well matched sides that just seem to be very similar in a lot of ways, and it's always 1-1, 1-0, 2-1. There's very little separating the sides, and I would imagine that'll be the case again on Saturday.
As you kind of mentioned with Stephen Robinson, he sticks to what he knows, doesn't he?
Yeah.
His Motherwell side were very similar in terms of being very well drilled, very well organised, and I think that's always the sign of a good manager when your team is organised, difficult to break down, and St Mirren have proved to be that since the start of last season, and finishing in the top 6 for the first time in God knows how many years. Was it 20, 30 odd years?
A lot.
So, a lot of years, we'll put it that way. But they're certainly a team on the up. But one thing I would say is their away record last year probably wasn't as consistent as their home record.
Yeah.
So is there opportunity for us where we're looking to probably make our place a little bit more of a fortress, and we have been ourselves a lot more well organised? It seems like it's got the makings of an absolute stalemate in store, doesn't it?
Definitely. It'll be 1 each, nothing each. There'll be nothing in it. But I think, as you kind of touched on, St Mirren aren't necessarily that great away from home. And Livi, albeit the chat of the plastic pitch advantage, Livi actually haven't been all that great at home. And they need to get back to that. And I think the early signs of how the team's being built and kind of the character of the team this year, they kind of want to get back to just being big, ugly, horrible to play against, and it'll be a good test. It'll be a really good test for them on Saturday.
I think, as you say, the kind of stalemate aspect potentially of it, St Mirren have very much played a kind of back 3, back 5 under Stephen Robinson. We've obviously moved to a back 3 this season. I think at the weekend they started off with a 3-4-3, which is similar to how we've set up. So Davy has had a habit, especially against St Mirren over the last couple of seasons, of matching them up, but we're already kind of tailor-made to match them up, and it's a system we've been working on. If you look back to the game in Paisley, what was it, March time last year, March time last year, where we all of a sudden decided to change our shape to match them up, and it had catastrophic results after 45 minutes.
Put it that way.
Yeah, but certainly players to watch out from on a St Mirren point of view. Really big fan of the boy Ryan Strain, Aussie fullback. I think I'm actually surprised that nobody's came sniffing about for him over the summer. He's been a fantastic addition since he arrived in, but he's had to do a bit of recruitment in his front line, hasn't he? Losing the likes of Curtis Main, Tony Watt going back to Dundee United. He's brought in Mikael Mandrom, which maybe on paper didn't look like a blockbuster signing given his 6-month spell at Motherwell, but he seems to just fit the model of a Stephen Robinson type of centre forward, doesn't he?
That's totally it. When they signed Mandron, I was like, And then the more you thought about it, I just went, no, actually, he's kind of got all the characteristics of a Stephen Robinson centre forward. Curtis Main, but not quite Curtis Main type player.
But if you're looking at the game, Callum, what would you go for a prediction on it?
I will go 1-0 Livi.
Oh, a clean sheet, 1-0. Big bastard, didn't Livi? I love it. I'd love us to get back to that.
From 45 yards. No, I think though, I can see it being. Well, they've been tight at the back, other than 15 minutes at Ibrox, they have been tight at the back, and I don't expect that to change. I can see it being a kind of a hard-earned 1-0.
Yeah, I'm going to go for the stalemate. I'm going 1 each as the absolute stalemate. But in terms of looking at our potential starting 11 for the game, do you reckon there's likely going to be Curtis Guthrie again starting up top, given the kind of nature of how St Mirren are? They are quite a physical side once again. Does he maybe stick with that and then bring Bruce on later on to try and stretch the game a bit?
I think so. If the idea is that if you're expecting a physical battle, you put Curtis up front, then you should be expecting a physical battle against St Mirren, surely. So I think it is, as much as Bruce is kind of deserves a start, I think this is one not unlike Saturday where you go with Curtis, see what he can do for an hour, and hopefully Anderson's on to kind of see them over the line. It's a tricky one. It is a tricky one because Anderson's obviously on form. Guthrie's not really a goal-scoring centre forward as such, but a lot of the elements probably needed on Saturday as kind of Guthrie's strength as opposed to Anderson's strength.
And we've obviously spoke about how well organised St Mirren are. They are notoriously difficult to break down. Scott Pittman was in the starting 11 for the Hibs game. He has, in my opinion, looked like the Scott Pittman of old from the start of this season, even looking at the early pre-season games. But do you maybe bring somebody in like a Stephen Kelly, a Dan Mackay even possibly, who got 4 goals in the reserve game during the week? Just wanted to remind you of that.
It was the reserves game during the week. What are you on about?
But is it potential for us to maybe add a bit more, in terms of our squad, a bit more of a flair player there to try and open St Mirren up a little bit?
I definitely I can see that. I mean, obviously, Mackay was playing as a number 9 for most of the reserves game. I don't see him being a number 9 on Saturday, but he did score 4 goals. Do you kind of ignore that and keep him on the bench? I don't know. Kelly's a funny one for me because I'd honestly be building the team around him. He is so good, but he's just not quite getting the minutes I expected of him. And then obviously you've got Singare was out injured, comes back and does what he does against Hibs.
Licks
it. Does he then come into the team? Maybe at the expense of Shinnie or. I don't know. It's a good problem to have because there's so many good options pretty much all over the park. Other than the back three is probably settled. Ben Rice will be left midfield. I don't think they'll be putting Danny Lloyd in from the start. Jason Holt, obviously, Holt and Pittman. Everything else is kind of up for grabs almost.
Just to touch on Danny Lloyd, he's arrived. I think he was at Rochdale last year, if I'm right in saying. He's arrived on a short-term deal till January, albeit with an option to potentially extend that further. Davey kind of mentioned some things in football just happen at the right time. Obviously, Montano's injury, where he's going to be out for anything between kind of 6 to 8 weeks. So a decent couple of months, but Lloyd's obviously someone who can come in and play in a variety of positions. I think he actually played in the reserve game as well during the week. What do you kind of make of that signing, and obviously what Davey's comments regarding it as well?
In many respects, it seems like a fairly obvious one to make. You've invited the boy up. You've liked what you've seen. He's 31. He's got bags of experience. He can fill a number of positions. Christian's out for 8 weeks, 2 months, 8 weeks, whatever it's going to be. I think it seems like a no-brainer to get something sorted until January and then maybe reassess the situation there.
And obviously, Davey made a comment about it basically coming off the back of getting Rangers in the Cup has allowed them to probably bring him in on that short-term deal whilst carrying potentially another couple of players who I think he's made pretty vocally he'd like to move on. So prediction-wise, I'm 1 each. You're 1-0. I'd happily take your prediction over mine, but for anyone on the fence about going on Saturday, please get along and cheer the team on. that's it for this week's episode of Talk Livi. We really appreciate you tuning in every week, and we'd love to hear your feedback. You can either leave us a review on iTunes or drop us a message on Twitter, Facebook or Instagram. You'll also find all the links to our weekly episodes on there as well, and any shares and likes are always appreciated. All our episodes are available on all the usual podcast streaming sites, including iTunes and Spotify. We're also on YouTube, and we'd love for you to subscribe to the channel. But if none of those options suit you though, all you have to do is head to our website, talklivipodcast.libsyn.com, where you'll find every single episode we've done over the last few years. That is it for this week. First of all, thank you very much, Callum, for joining us again. I'm sure you'll be on it at some other point during the season.
No doubt.
No doubt, but thank you very much for joining us, and let's hope for another great week following the Lothians' finest football team.
West Lothian is our battle cry. This is the place from which we hail. Livingston, oh Livingston, it's up to Ambervale. Livingston, 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 oh Livingston, oh Livingston, we love it when you score. Livingston, oh Livingston, the Amberville Lions roar. Livingston, oh Livingston, we realize our vision. Livingston, oh Livingston, into the Premiership.